Steve Harvey heard something in her voice and broke the rules. Steve Harvey heard something in her voice and broke the rules. Steve Harvey Family Feud storytelling script. Steve Harvey does not break rules. That is not a small statement. The man has hosted Family Feud for over a decade. He knows every protocol, every boundary, every line that separates the show from the moment outside it. He knows that his job is to run the game, deliver the energy, and keep 22 minutes of television on schedule. He does not go off script. He does not cross the line between host and contestant. He does not make promises on live television that the producers have not approved. Until the afternoon, Alina Voss spoke 4 words into the Fast Money microphone. Not an answer, not a joke, not a complaint. And something in her voice made Steve Harvey stop in the middle of a question, set down his card, and do something that had never been done in the history of the show. Those 4 words were, "I can hear her." Nobody in the studio understood what that meant. Not the audience, not the crew, not Steve himself, not yet. But he had heard something underneath those words, something raw and specific and unmistakably real. And he had learned a long time ago that when a moment like that presents itself, you do not look away from it. What followed would stay with everyone in that studio for the rest of their lives. It would move a prime-time audience to tears, break a record that had stood for 7 years, and prove something that game show formats are not designed to prove. That the most extraordinary things happen not when people play perfectly, but when they play for something that cannot be measured on a scoreboard. This is what happened that afternoon. All of it. Stay with it. If you believe some stories deserve to be heard, subscribe now and make sure you don't miss the next one. Alina Voss was 63 years old, a retired music teacher from Knoxville, Tennessee, who had spent 38 years teaching choir and piano at the same public middle school where she had once been a student herself. She was not a woman who sought attention. She was the kind of person who stayed after the program ended to stack the chairs, who remembered every student's birthday for the full 3 years they were in her building, who drove 40 minutes each way to every school concert for decades without once considering that she was doing something extraordinary. She considered it the job. She considered it the point. Alina had been widowed 11 years earlier when her husband, Frank, a retired postal worker and part-time woodworker, died of a sudden cardiac event at 61. They had been married for 34 years. They had one daughter, Catherine, who was now 37 and worked as a pediatric occupational therapist in Nashville. The thing about Alina Voss that people who knew her understood immediately and strangers took a little longer to see was this: she was made of music. Not in a poetic sense, in a functional one. She heard the world in rhythm and pitch. She could identify a person's emotional state from the way their voice changed register when they were holding something back. She had spent 38 years teaching 12-year-olds to open their throats and mean what they sang, and she had developed, over those decades, an almost preternatural sensitivity to the sound of genuine feeling versus the sound of performance. After Frank died, Alina had channeled everything into Catherine and into her students and into the choir program that she ran until the year she retired. She was, by every external measure, a woman who was managing beautifully. She was present. She was functional. She was warm and engaged and productive. She was also, quietly and without drama, still grieving, not in the acute way of the early years, but in the steady, background way that the loss of a long marriage tends to produce. The kind of grief that does not prevent you from living but does change the texture of the living. Certain songs, certain silences, the woodworking tools still in the garage that she had not moved and did not intend to move. The Family Feud application had come from Catherine. She had submitted it as a birthday gift, a joke almost, until the show called back. Alina had agreed on the condition that Catherine come with her, along with Catherine's husband Daniel, Alina's sister Ruth, and Ruth's husband Gerald. 5 people who loved each other and had learned, through Frank's death and everything since, that showing up together was the only real answer to almost any question. Alina told no one in advance what she was carrying. She had not planned to say anything personal on the show at all. She came to play the game, support her family, and go home. She had not planned on hearing Frank's voice. The Voss family was matched against the Delacroix family from Baton Rouge, 5 first cousins in their 30s who competed with the cheerful aggression of people who had been arguing over dinner tables their entire lives. They were excellent contestants, fast, instinctive, and collectively very funny. The audience loved them. The main game was close through 3 rounds, with the Delacroix family holding a narrow lead going into the 4th. But Alina answered a crucial question, name something people always lie about on a first date, with an answer so perfectly observed that it hit the number 1 spot with 61 points and swung the entire board. The Voss family took the lead. They did not give it back. Catherine was nominated to go first in Fast Money. She was composed, systematic, the kind of person who works well under clinical pressure and brings that same quality to everything she does. She scored 118 points, an exceptional first-round total that gave Alina the most comfortable possible cushion. She needed only 82 points to win the $20,000. Alina Voss stepped up to the podium. Steve Harvey came toward her with the comfortable ease of someone who had run this segment 10,000 times. He made a small joke about the gap between Alina's age and the average age of his contestants, which she received with the polished timing of a woman who had spent 4 decades managing middle schoolers. The audience liked her immediately. Steve started the clock. Name something people do when they can't sleep. Walk around, said Alina. Survey said number 2, 24 points. Name the best sound to wake up to. Alina's answer came quickly and easily, birds singing. Survey said number 1. 37 points. The audience applauded. Alina nodded once, hands light on the podium, composed and methodical. Name something a husband always forgets. Anniversaries, said Alina, and something changed just briefly in the way she said it. Not a break, not a pause. A texture, a small, involuntary quality in the word that a music teacher who spent 38 years listening for the truth inside a sung note would recognize as the sound of a real thing touching a real place. Survey said. Number 1, 43 points. Combined total, 222. The $20,000 was won. Steve Harvey moved to the 4th question. Name something that smells like home. Alina answered, fresh bread. Survey said, number 2, 21 points. And then before Steve had moved fully to the 5th question, in the half-second transition between the board reveal and the next card, Alina said it. Quietly. Not to Steve specifically, not to the audience, not to the cameras. To herself, the way people speak when something surfaces without permission. I can hear her. Steve Harvey stopped. He looked at Alina directly. The card with the 5th question was still in his hand. The clock was running. He set the card down on the podium. The production team exchanged glances. The audience felt the shift without fully understanding it. Steve Harvey did not look at the production team. He looked at Alina Voss and said, "What did you say?" Alina looked up at him, slightly startled, as if she had not fully realized she had spoken aloud. There was a moment, brief and complete, where it was clear she was deciding whether to pull back, deflect, keep the private thing private. She did not pull back. The 4th question, she said. Fresh bread. My husband used to bake bread every Sunday morning. I could hear him downstairs, the way he moved around the kitchen, the specific sounds. I heard him for a second. She stopped. She was not crying. Her voice was steady and factual, the voice of a woman who had spent 38 years delivering hard truths to young people with kindness and without flinching. He passed 11 years ago, she said. I don't hear him very often anymore, but just then I did. The studio was completely silent. Steve Harvey stood at the podium beside Alina Voss and did not say anything for a long moment. He was not performing the silence. He was in it. That moment right there is why these stories matter. Subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it today. The clock was still running. Nobody on the production team stopped it. They were too still, too caught in the moment to react. But Steve Harvey was not looking at the clock. He was looking at Alina. How long were you married? He asked. 34 years. 34 years. Steve nodded slowly. He reached out and placed his hand briefly on Alina's hand where it rested on the podium. Not dramatically, the way one person steadies another. What was his name? Frank, said Alina, and she smiled, a real, unguarded smile, the kind that grief produces when it is touched carefully by someone who is not afraid of it. He was not a great baker, honestly, but he tried every single Sunday for 30 years, so eventually he got pretty good. Quiet, genuine laughter moved through the audience, the warm kind, not the performative kind. Steve Harvey laughed too. Then he became serious again, but gently so. Alina, I have to ask you something, and I want you to understand that however you answer this, we are going to honor it completely. He paused. You came here today carrying Frank with you. You have been carrying him this whole game, and you just won $20,000. But I want to know, not for the show, not for the cameras, why did you come? Alina looked at him steadily for a moment. Then she looked out at the audience and then back at Steve. Catherine submitted the application as a birthday gift, she said. She thought it would be fun, and she was right, it has been fun. But the reason I said yes, she paused, gathering the exact words. Frank always said I played everything too small, that I had this capacity to fill a room and I kept choosing to stand in the corner of it. He said it to me the last time we argued, which was about 4 days before he died. We never finished that argument. A breath. I have been thinking about it for 11 years, so I came here. I suppose I wanted to stand in the middle of the room for once, for him. Steve Harvey's composure held barely visibly with the specific effort of a man who has learned over many years how to stay present in the weight of a moment without being taken under by it. He was quiet for several seconds. Then he said, Frank was right. He turned to the audience. His voice was still quiet, but it carried. This woman stood up here and answered 4 questions while carrying 34 years of a life she built with someone she loved. And she did it with more grace than most people manage when they're not carrying anything at all. He looked back at Alina. One more question. You ready? Alina straightened. She adjusted her position at the podium with the unhurried composure of a woman who had spent 4 decades teaching children that the note you hold longest is the one that matters most. Ask it, she said. Steve Harvey picked up the 5th card. Name a sound that makes people feel safe. Alina did not hesitate. She did not close her eyes or reach for the answer. It came from the same place her other answers had come from, not strategy, not calculation, but the honest surface of a life lived attentively. A familiar voice, she said. The studio held its breath. Survey said. The board turned. Number 1, 49 points. The audience rose before the number was fully visible on the board. The standing ovation was immediate and unanimous, the kind that an audience produces not because they have been prompted or because something spectacular has happened technically, but because they have been in the presence of something true, and they know it, and they want to mark it. Alina Voss stood at the fast money podium with her hands folded in front of her, completely still, while the sound built around her. Her final score was 174 points. Combined with Catherine's 118, the family total was 292, the highest combined fast money score recorded on the show in 7 years. She did not cry. She simply looked out at the audience with the expression of someone who has, after a long time, finally finished saying something important. Catherine reached her first, then Daniel, then Ruth and Gerald, and the 5 of them stood together at the center of the stage in the way that families stand together when something has been both lost and in some partial and imperfect and real way found again. Steve Harvey stood back and let the moment be what it was. When Alina finally turned to him, she said only, "I think Frank would have enjoyed that," Steve Harvey said. "I think Frank just heard every word." At the end of the taping, Alina did not give Steve Harvey anything. There was nothing to give, no object that held the weight of what had passed between them, but before she left the stage, she stopped and turned back to him one more time. "You broke the rules today," she said, "setting the card down like that, asking me those questions." Steve Harvey smiled. "I did." "Why?" he thought for a moment. "Because your voice told me there was something in the room that was more important than the game. And I have been doing this long enough to know you don't walk past that." Alina Voss nodded once, the way a music teacher nods when a student finally produces the note they have been reaching for all semester. "Good answer," she said. The episode aired on a Thursday evening in February. By the following morning, the clip of Steve Harvey setting down the card had been viewed 14 million times. By the weekend, it had been shared across more than 60 countries. The moment people kept replaying, not the perfect final answer, not the scoreboard reveal, but the 4 words, "I can hear her," became one of the most discussed moments in daytime television that year. What the response revealed was something the producers had not anticipated and could not have engineered. The sheer volume of people who recognized that moment, not as spectators, but as participants in their own version of it. The comments beneath every clip were not about the game. They were about the specific, strange, unexplained experiences of grief. The smell of a coat, a particular song, the sound of footsteps in a kitchen, that arrive without warning and feel, for the people who experience them, like a kind of contact that does not fit neatly into any category. The Alzheimer's Association, the American Hospice Foundation, and several bereavement support organizations shared the clip in their communications that week, noting that Alina's 4 words had articulated something that grieving people often struggle to describe to those who have not yet experienced loss. Grief counselors reported that clients brought the clip to sessions, pointing to it as the closest approximation of what they had been trying to explain. Alina returned to Knoxville the following Monday. She had agreed to no press interviews, no follow-up features, no social media presence. She had a life to return to: her garden, her sister, the occasional private piano student she still took on, and the woodworking tools in the garage that she had decided, sometime in the weeks following the taping, she was finally ready to donate to a community craft program. Not because she was moving on, but because Frank would have hated the idea of good tools sitting idle. Catherine started a small private support group for adult children managing aging or widowed parents. Not a formal organization, just a monthly dinner in Nashville with 12 people who needed a table where they could say the true things. It grew steadily. Within a year, 3 additional groups had formed from the original. Steve Harvey did not speak publicly about the episode for several weeks after it aired. When he finally addressed it in a long-form interview, he was asked specifically about the moment he set the card down. He said, "I did not make a decision in that moment. There was no decision to make. When someone's voice tells you that something real is happening, you respond to the real thing. That is not a rule you learn from television. That is a rule you learn from life. He was asked whether he thought he had broken protocol. He considered the question seriously. I think there is a version of this job where the protocol is the point, he said. Run the clock, read the card, reveal the answer, keep moving. That version of the job is fine. It produces a good show. But there is another version where the protocol exists to serve the moment, and when the moment outgrows the protocol, you set the protocol down. I set the card down. I would do it again. He paused. Then, Elena Voss came into that studio carrying 34 years of a life she built with someone she loved, and she stood in the middle of the room with it. Frank told her to stand in the middle of the room. I just made sure there was room for her to stand. 6 months after the episode aired, Family Feud reached out to Elena about a follow-up segment. She agreed on one condition, that Catherine appear with her, and that they spend part of the segment talking not about the game show moment, but about the practical realities of grief and the specific, underrepresented experience of long-term widowhood. The years after the acute stage, when the world expects recovery to be complete and the actual work of integration is still ongoing. The producers agreed. The segment aired in the fall. It was the highest-rated follow-up episode in the show's history. In it, Steve Harvey asked Elena what she would say to someone in the early stages of losing a long marriage. She answered without hesitation, in the voice of a woman who had been a teacher for 38 years and knew how to say the difficult thing with precision and care. She said, "Let it be as big as it is. Don't manage it down to a size that other people find comfortable. It is the size it is because the love was the size it was. Honor the proportion." That answer, like James Whitfield's before it, entered the broader cultural conversation in the weeks that followed, shared in bereavement newsletters, read at memorial services, cited in a published essay on grief in the modern era. A hospice organization in Oregon printed it on a card distributed to families during the end-of-life process. Elena was unaware of most of this. She was in Knoxville, tending her garden, teaching her occasional piano student, attending Catherine's monthly dinner when she could. She was, as Frank had wanted her to be, standing in the middle of the room. On the first Sunday morning after the episode's follow-up aired, she baked bread. She had not done it since Frank died. She used his recipe, written in his handwriting on an index card that had lived in the kitchen drawer for 11 years. The recipe was imprecise in the way that his baking had always been quantities described as some of this and about that much, and the loaf did not come out perfectly. She ate it at the kitchen table with her coffee and called Catherine while it was still warm. It was not a grand gesture. It was not a resolution. It was simply a Sunday morning and a kitchen that smelled like home and a voice she loved on the other end of the line. Steve Harvey kept the transcript of Elena's answer about proportion in the top drawer of his desk at the studio. He did not frame it or display it. He kept it there because some things are most useful when they are close and quiet and easy to return to. He broke the rules that afternoon in February because a woman's voice told him to. He has never regretted it. He would do it again tomorrow and the day after that, and every time a voice in that studio tells him that something true is happening in the room. Because that, as Elena Voss would say, is the point of having a voice at all. If this story stayed with you, please like, share, and subscribe. These stories exist because people like you make space for them. We will see you in the next one.